welcome to the CORY MORGAN Show, your weekly chance to let me help you try to navigate through these insane political times. But I got to admit, I'm not too sure what's going on these days. They're trying to interpret it. They're just insane. It gives us no shortage of things to talk about, things to cover, and things to interpret. So this is live. Those who are watching live, be sure to use that comment scroll. I see Peter LaFontaine talking about, asking about the Liberal debates. That was one of the things that happened. The Liberal Party love-in was the last couple of days. Why weren't they asked tough questions such as about whether or not they would keep Stephen Guilbeault? Well, we know they're not going to ask those tough questions at an internal party debate. And you can rest assured when legacy media runs the debates in the general election, whenever the heck we might get it, they're not going to ask tough questions like that. But we can take those tough questions here, throw those out there. I see Mike there commenting from Freedom Honey and others, and, just keep things civil. All right, this show, this is how we pay some of the bills, is sponsored by New World Precious Metals, and they're based right here in Alberta. Everybody's big on staying close to home these days. Well, inflationary money printing and debt, they've decimated the average Canadian savings. Gold and silver are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years. Last year saw 30% gains. New World Precious Metals offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with gold and silver. Check them out, guys. Get some gold, get some silver, hedge your bets. Can't rely on the Canadian dollar, I promise you. They're at newworldpm.com. All right, so yes, in a bit I'm going to have Erica Barudis on. We're going to talk. She's from Macamee College, their applied politics program, and she's also a senator-elect. We're going to talk about some of the provincial stuff. We got a budget coming up. I'm going to talk about some non-controversial stuff to get it going, though, and kind of a world thing. It's time for the world to have a frank discussion about Islam and how it fits into modern societies, the ones that respect human rights. It's an elephant in the room, and ignoring it has real costs. One of the worst examples was in Rotherham, I'm probably mispronouncing it, UK, where young girls were recruited, groomed, and raped for decades by gangs of Pakistani men. The J report estimates over 1,400 young women were victims of these gangs. The number is likely much higher since so many of these crimes went unreported. So how was it that these monsters were able to assail young women for so long without it being exposed? Well, it's because the perpetrators were Islamic Pakistanis, and authorities didn't want to touch the issue for fear of putting Islam in a bad light. It's one of the most shameful acts of state cowardice in modern history. The crimes were reported for decades, but action was muted for fear of upsetting the Islamic community. Meanwhile, the rapes of young girls continued. And no, not every Muslim is an extremist. In fact, the vast majority of them are peaceful folks. I understand that. But let's quit pretending Islam doesn't spawn more extremists than any other religion. In fact, more than all of them combined. Part of it's an ingrained cultural and religious disrespect for women. Women are considered property in traditional Islamic cultures. They are to be traded, beaten, and even stoned to death for the crime of adultery, which usually means they let themselves be raped. Yes, rape victims are considered perpetrators in these traditional Islamic states. That's why they're whipped for daring to show their faces or hair in some of those countries, and why honor killings for women who dare to have relations with men their family don't approve of still happen by the thousands every year. There are 57 member states in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. These are the nations dominated by Islamic populations and usually governed under some form of theocratic rule. There are a few that are considered democracies among them, but they're rife with corruption and defined actually as flawed democracies at best. The rest are outright dictatorships. Many of those nations are skirmishing or warring with their neighbors, and when those wars are resolved, they tend to descend into sectarian civil wars since Sunni Muslims can't stand the Shia Muslims. When the Islamic nations are liberated by other countries, the freedoms are temporary at best. Look at Afghanistan. Women are now barred from even seeking an education and going to school. In Iraq, they lowered the age of marriage to 9 years for girls, following in the footsteps or sandals of Muhammad. Women have things bad enough in the Islamic world. Look at the LGBTQ people. They have it even worse. It's illegal to be gay in every Islamic nation, and the penalty is often death through savage means such as throwing them from buildings. The first openly gay Muslim imam was murdered just weeks ago. The silence from the purple-haired gender advocates in North America is kind of deafening on that. While the constant wars break out in Islamic nations, floods of fighting-age male refugees pour into other nations. Since opening their borders to Syrian refugees in 2017, European nations have been dealing with domestic nightmares as the influx of these men continues to refuse to integrate into a civilized culture. Parts of Paris are virtual war zones. Germany endured a rape fest over the New Year's Eve carried out by North African migrants in 2016. Many nations have influxes of migrants, but it rarely leads to the challenges that come with sudden numbers of Islamic migrants. I mean, women aren't afraid to walk into cities' Chinatown. Attacks on crowds carried out by Islamic extremists with vehicles and knives are becoming more frequent. And even when they scream Allahu Akbar and are in possession of Islamic State flags when they commit their acts of terrorism, media and politicians are quick to state, well, we're not sure what the motive of the attacker might be. just a lone wolf, right? Let's quit pretending that the Israel conflict isn't rooted in Islam. Well, 1.7 million Muslims reside in Israel with full rights. Jews have been driven from every Islamic nation. Islamists in the Middle East can't abide by even a single Jew in Israel, and rest assured their goal is the eradication of them. They don't even try to hide it when they're chanting their genocidal line from the river to the sea at every opportunity. The only ones denying the intent to wipe every Jew out of Israel by neighboring Islamists are Western liberals. The hate-filled pro-Hamas protests continue to clog Canadian streets while they target Jewish neighborhoods. These protests almost always involve Islamic prayers in the middle of the roads. So again, let's not pretend there isn't an Islamist base to this. Religions are thought systems. They aren't immutable like race. Every religion should be open to critique, and most are. It's only when one's critical of Islam that the accusations of bigotry come, followed by cancellation efforts and usually death threats. It's not a matter of being intolerant. It's a matter of being a modern thinker. I'm not talking about banning Islam. Freedom of religion is essential. But I am saying there is something inherently flawed within that faith, and it must be discussed. Other religions have experienced reformations and evolved with the modern world. It's time to examine how Islam can start doing the same. We have to begin that process by admitting there's a problem. And there is a problem, guys. All right. On that light note, I'll turn to other news with our news editor, Dave Naylor, who I know was gagging as I mispronounced that UK community.
Rotherham.
Okay.
Rotherham.
Thank you. I know I blew it.
I was actually born near there, matter of fact, and I've been to Rotherham many a time on the way to my grandmother's place in Romarsh.
Well, there we go. That mother tongue yet is still cruel to even us English speakers. I mean, I still can't pronounce Worcestershire sauce. Yeah,
should stick to English. Not the Queen's English, just English.
What's the King's English now?
No, but I'm sorry, yes, the King's English.
All right.
You're not afraid to tackle the controversial subjects, are you?
Well, that one annoys me a little.
And the Kamloops hoax.
Yes.
That's another good one, too.
It just keeps going.
And what's the latest one this week? You've been having fun with the treatment center, drug treatment centers.
Yes.
So you like to.
Well, we people shy away from the tough ones. I think no, we actually need to rip the Band-Aid off and get on them. I mean, it's putting things off really makes them better.
I think so. I think you're right. I mean, I've never seen such a tumultuous time in politics on every side. You got your international, you got your federal, and you got your local here with the upcoming mayor's race. It's just crazy.
Forget me wonderful. Yeah, I can barely find time to talk about that.
Johnny Farkas announced he's running for mayor again today. So
back again, yeah.
Back again. And of course, it was Donald Trump this morning that was making all the news. Had his first cabinet meeting, invited the press in, and then went on a free-for-all press conference for ages. Which somewhere in the middle, we think, he announced that the tariffs are pushed back to April 2nd. So we'll have to start working on our April Fool's Day story now. Big celebrity death to report on the star of Gossip Girl, who I must admit, Corey, I've never seen a single episode.
No, either have I.
So she died at 39, and it's tearing up social media at the moment. A big story that really bothers me, Corey, that we've had for a couple of days now, and we had an update this morning on a trans father in Grand Prairie. He's actually transitioning to be a woman, but he's now a trans man. Stabbed his two kids, and one of them very badly slit one of the child's throats through the esophagus. So they're now in the children's hospital here, and have to being fed by food tubing for the next several months. But some local vigilante wannabes or interested folks tracked this guy down. He wasn't charged. He was released after 26 hours in the nut house. And they filmed him, and he started explaining why he did it. And this guy's 6'7", big, probably only weighs about 150 pounds. He starts going on about how he was trying to protect his kids from being abducted by human traffickers. And that's why he slit their throats. And he's out on the streets, right? I mean, I just don't get it. Without charge that we know about, the RCMP has handled this badly. The children need to be protected, but nobody's talking about it. And we're digging away. And our Chris Holt-Coroner was led the story, and Linda Slobodian, our columnist, is now working on it today too. Another mid-air collision almost avoided yesterday at the D.C. airport, the same one that had the fatal crash. And it comes on the heels of one in Chicago that we were watching earlier this morning, Corey. And the best news of the day is NASA now says that killer asteroid is not going to hit Earth, but it could hit the moon. So what that does to the moon and potential tidal changes and all that sort of good stuff, who knows? But as you can see by the moon, it's had crater impacts before. So
Yeah.
throughout history, it's been hit by a few things. So we'll have to wait and see whether Armageddon awaits.
Well, maybe if we had a big enough asteroid tax, we could reduce the risk.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Don't tell Stephen Gilmore.
No, it'll be the next minister's thing. Well, I mean, yeah, some people are mixed blessing on whether or not the asteroid should come or not.
Yeah, if it could land on his head, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, it's just a matter of where it lands.
Yeah, true.
All right.
We could guide it right down.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I'll let you get back to trying to dig through again. It's just such a crazy news scroll these days, and report what we can.
It's all fun and games.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. So that was our news editor, Dave Naylor, and yet the stories are coming hard and heavy. Yeah, Chris Oldcorn, he's always hitting them hard out there, out of Saskatchewan, and covering stories even that come out here. The reason we can do it, guys, is where I got to nag you, but it's true, is subscribers. You got to get on there. It's $10 a month, $100 a year. That's how we keep this room going, the newsroom. I got another show coming. It's going to start next week, by the way. It's going to specialize in covering the election. It's going to come out. We believe it's going to air every Friday. We'll see. I'm going to be recording it every Thursday, but we're going to have that once a week for at least a few months, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We're going to cover a lot of things with that. So, yes, get on though. Subscribe. $10 a month. Western Standards News. You can see in the bottom /subscription. That way we don't take tax dollars. That way we don't pander to the party in power like we're seeing with legacy media right now. And that way we can just keep this sort of stuff coming. So, yeah, good to see you guys coming in. Wild Rose Paradoxy. Yeah, it's funny. Some of you can read exhaustion in a comment with Paradoxy, like saying along the lines of, what would happen if we just didn't cover Trump for a week? Just left it alone for a week. Probably not a lot, because this is the frustrating thing among many with President Trump. You don't know where he's bloody coming from. I mean, again, I'm a conservative. I didn't want to see more Democrats. I've been getting into this on social media with others and everything else too. I'm sorry, but I'm not part of the Trump cult, and I won't be. We need at least a degree of truth going on. One of the most frustrating things, if we're talking about negotiating trade, if we're talking about it, if we're going to be serious about it, fine, absolutely. We got issues, certainly got issues. Canada doesn't keep up its share on defense, and we could fix things up at the border, fine. But then when they start throwing out that baloney of $200 billion subsidy, it's crap. It's 100% pure crap. It's untrue. It's a trade deficit. Big difference. It just means they buy more from us than we buy from them. That is not a subsidy by any definition. And he's got to be called out on it instead of having a bunch of Trump's fart catchers online saying, well, no, he means something else. No, he doesn't mean something else. He's nuts. He's saying whatever comes out of his head. We can't negotiate based on that. And it's shaking our economy. And then, look, I'm an independent supporter. I'm not married to the concept of Canada by any means. But if you think that this sort of rattling, this taunting, this 51st state, this Governor Canada talk from Trump brings us any closer to a 51st state, you're dearly mistaken. It's actually entrenching more nationalism with Canadians than we've seen in decades. And on top of it all, if you look at the polls, the Liberals are gaining because of this. The Liberals are actually starting to do better. When it looked like they didn't have a chance on earth of winning the election, suddenly they're neck and neck. At first, it looked like it might have been just Frank Graves and an outlying poll or something like that. But no, we're starting to see it now over and over and over again. It is basically because when you've got an outside enemy, and I'm not, I won't go with that, talking about Trump, the United States being an enemy, but yeah, in the trade sense, that's pretty much where we are. And it rallies people. It brings them together. I mean, again, people keep dismissing it as just negotiation tactics. Look, lying is not good negotiation tactics. It's not in good faith. We are allies of the United States. We have been for over a century. We're close friends. I love the United States. I spent a lot of time down there. I have family down there. I want us to get closer. I want fewer trade barriers, fewer tariffs. I wouldn't mind getting back to crossing the border without passports again. And that to do such things, we would need to clean up who's coming into Canada in the first place. I fully understand that. But we need to bring the conversation into rationality. We have to get real with it. And we're not doing that because we don't know where he's going to be from day to day. I mean, Trump promised these tariffs are going to slam us and they're going to come at the start of March. And now, just out of the blue, maybe we're going to sit till April. Okay, I guess that's a relief. But how do we plan for anything? How do we do anything? And how do we know a week from now he won't change his mind again? I don't mind a bit of a wild card in politics. I certainly don't. I'd like to see things stirred up a bit. But this is just getting to the point of causing damage for the sake of damage. And we've got to start thinking about how we can deal with this. It's not doing us any favors. I don't know if it's doing him any either. Tariffs are clumsy, bad policy. Look, if we're conservatives, we like to say we are. Guys, we don't try to tax things better. We try to get government out of the way. And it's just a frustrating thing that's carrying on. I see some of the talk about the insanity. And this is what Dave mentioned. So up in Grand Prairie, that crazed person slit the throat of 2 children and then has been released. And in the case in just a couple of days ago, a person stabbed a 6-year-old child that was in Halifax. This woman, and she'd been released on bail just shortly before that. And then she went out and randomly stabbed a child. I see the guest in the lobby, so I'll just close quickly. I won't talk a little further on that because I want to talk about some of those treatment centers a little later. But this is we're seeing indications of is our naive and misplaced movement to take people out of mental health care facilities. When we put them out, we see some of the worst of consequences. And then that's what we're seeing right now. They're letting them out because they got nowhere else to keep them. And now we're getting literally children stabbed. And we can't put up with that. Okay, I see Erica waiting in the lobby there. So let's bring her in and talk about our provincial insanity for a little while. Hello, Erica. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Well, mixed. I mean, I honestly get to the point when I go through all the news stories to try and plan a show, get a headache, trying to think, what few things can I manage to cover in this short time? Because there's just so much going on right now.
There is not a shortage. I was just saying, we're filming our podcast twice this week because there's so much going on in Alberta news that we want to cover before even talking about the budget. And I think that it needs to have two shows, unfortunately, but good for content is really the only upside.
That is. And as well, I mean, we'll get to that. And you're instructing at Macamee College with applied politics. I mean, for the people whose heads are spinning, that's a great way to get that basic knowledge on these things and try to better equip yourself to interpret.
Yeah, we definitely have issues management and conflict resolution portion within the course. So yeah, it's definitely giving us in the class that we've launched our first pilot in January. We'll have another one in May, just to test out the material. We're definitely having a lot of great examples. We talked about loss of confidence, and the federal government is giving us live examples of that too. So it's very much applied to everything that you would learn, or I wish I learned in a poli-sci degree and in my years at the legislature, all in one course.
Right on. That's where college is better than universities in some ways. You get more of the applied stuff, not just getting into the long theoretical, which is important too. All right, enough of that. So we got a budget coming in Alberta. Yeah. Maybe we kind of start there. I mean, we're at speculation point, but some of the stuff always leaks out a little early. It sounds like the tax break might finally be coming.
Oh, thank the Lord. I've been screaming about this because I was, as you know, in the war room. I was part of the Smith administration, and the personal tax credit was the first thing we announced in the election. And it is something that I think when you're talking about affordability or cost of living, anything like that, where it is proven that if you get money back, you put it back into the economy. So I'm excited finally about this one coming through, but apparently it has a caveat, which is a deficit. Yeah.
Now that's something I want to ask about. Is it impossible to cut spending? Because I'm getting really tired of conservatives claiming they're conservative and then they lose their courage as soon as they get in and will not cut the bloody spending.
Yeah, I don't think any of these ministers went in and are coming out having to really have said that they cut. I think a lot of them stayed whole. Trust me, I'm going to go through. I know before I came on, you were talking about compassionate intervention, but I think the government is pretty quick to assume that their process works as opposed to test a pilot. And these are hundreds of millions of dollars invested into facilities without a proof of concept. I'm very critical of that. I'm very critical of how our grant systems work. I'm sure that the infrastructure list, I'm sorry, you don't fund things that don't put bums in seats or people in care over anything else when you've got a tight budget. So unfortunately, Alberta has been a have province for so long. I actually lived this through the Redford administration of like the first time you really needed to see tightening your belts. And it doesn't go over well. We want to be fiscal conservatives, but we've also been in a very fortunate place for so long that we didn't really need to make tough cuts.
Yeah, so some of that
And I hate it.
we do have a big variable happening south of the border. We don't know how that's going to impact finances or what's going to happen with some of our commodities and trade goods. But at the same time, that would tell me that means that we should be tightening our belt more right now then so that we can take any ups and downs.
I think you're right, Corey. I think the challenge is that all that says to me is the deficit will get bigger in fiscal updates, right? Last year, they had a good year where oil prices were good. They could really have positive impacts. Obviously, some of it is required to go to pay debt, down the deficits or down the debt, and also into the Heritage Trust fund savings. So there is already like money that's coming in has already got to go into the piggy bank to pay off debt. I'm a huge fiscal hawk. I don't know how many of those people at Treasury Board, how they're feeling. I think there's like tails between legs that maybe they didn't get to where they wanted. But I think there's a lot of stuff within every budget that everyone should be like, shit, this is a tough budget. Not all my stakeholders are going to be happy, but we're doing what's right for Albertans and what as conservatives we commit to, which is a balanced budget.
Yeah, so we seem to have a government that's not looking before they leap a lot, which again, I kind of like sometimes, but we're also seeing, as you mentioned with the compassionate care centers, I'm pretty actually enthusiastic about them, but I also understand what you're saying. This is untested ground. I mean, part of the opponents to it, I'm also pointing out, because they're saying it never works. Well, wait a minute, point to the ones that didn't, because actually, as far as I can find, it hasn't been tried. But that's a whole lot of money to try something if we're not sure.
Yeah, I'm all about proof of concept. So by all means, this is not something I personally experienced, but if you want to test that, do like every other procurement process works. And maybe procurement process isn't the thing to be mentioning right now, but that like there is a process. And so we need to test concept well. They could have built 3, not 11.
Well, and you've helped me segue with that and procurement, because, I mean, we can't avoid that elephant in the room. I wanted to talk mostly about budget, but this just isn't going away. What the heck is going on? I mean, speaking of, I do believe AHS that has a bloated bureaucracy that really needed to be tackled and taken on, but they seem to be losing the war with it, and they've made a mess.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like you said, sometimes they leap and make decisions before sometimes. And in this case, I feel like they're not trying to be proactive on anything to manage this. They're being very reactive and waiting for screaming and shouting to even have that independent inquiry or the independent investigation that they just announced last Wednesday. And so I feel like they're really losing and struggling with the narrative. Even as recent as today, I think what we're seeing now is that it's not just health. I agree. I still support the reforms. I still think that there's a lot of bloated bureaucracy there. And that if someone's not doing their job and their scope, which is to support and enforce reform, and they're the head of it, by all means, they should be terminated. If that's the case. Now, they were peeling back an onion and finding some things. I think timing was a fault of the government's for just the sequence of events. But now we're seeing it in infrastructure. We're seeing it mental health and addictions. We're now seeing it as early as this morning in public safety. So I think the big thing now is every ministry better be going in, doing independent investigations, audits. And yeah, like sometimes these are at the executive director level that isn't going to catch the eye of the minister, but these are, or be elevated to the minister, which is unfortunate. But this is something where, like, for their own butts, I would encourage every minister to go do this internally.
Yeah, well, and it gets frustrating. I mean, I again was optimistic about the concept. We really do need to look at some maybe freestanding specialized facilities outside of, centralized hospitals, and yes, private facilities. But if you start to get whiffs of possible corruption, and if it sounds like you're not sourcing those or doing proper procurement, they could be setting the reforms back rather than forward. And that really, I got to admit, is ticking me off.
It is. I feel the exact same. I think these reforms were we both know that reforms and generational change won't happen overnight. And this is just like really making it sticky for them to validate why and how they're doing it. Again, I'm all for publicly funding private facilities to speed up service if it's in the best interest of Albertans and it's at a good rate. And if it goes through a procurement process, right? Like, I am not against let's find any solution to deal with this, because I think that everyone's fed up with not having access to care. So let's get creative, but not creative into the point that it's questionable. And I think that that's something that is now being investigated, alleging that there was interference, all of those things. I am at a point where I'm like, I just want the truth. I want good, proper due diligence to occur, because again, you're right. Now it's setting this back by 6 months, maybe a year. And generational change is going to take not just one term of Premier Smith, but another term of the UCP. And this is going to get them into a lot of hot water that might impact them in the polls.
Well, I think if anything else, they really need to clear the air, have an inquiry, get moving, let's get on with this. Because Peter Guthrie, even Don Braid, I have to admit, said like, well, okay, Guthrie left and maybe it's a point of principle, but at the same time, he threw a hand grenade with no evidence. And likewise, we've seen a statement of claim, which may or may not be true, but we haven't seen any hard evidence. We need an inquiry to figure out what's going on. You can't keep dismissing it because people will assume the worst.
And I definitely think that regardless of what ideology you are as Albertans, we just want the truth. I'm expecting, and maybe I'm a little bit more crass than folks, but I've lived through enough of this. I want some heads on platters. So I'm expecting that, like, if there is anyone, whether it was someone affiliated with the government, individuals in bureaucracies, like, let's find out where the toxicity is coming from, and let's clean it out.
Well, that's it, because there's motivations that people can read in on both ends. There's some very upset bureaucrats who really actually want to derail any reforms to a system that they're pretty, comfortable within. And unfortunately, there's always people trying to better themselves through procurement processes and their own businesses and things like that. And both are believable. We need to find out what the heck's happening here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're a good business and you have a good business case, you should be able to win those bids through the proper process. And it's unfortunate that maybe that wasn't the case. Again, all alleges, it's all being allegations. So none of this has been proven. And I think that's a really important thing. But again, coming back to that narrative is, if I'm the government and I know something is, sticky, or I'm concerned about it, or there's any caution, I'm like very much of the like issues manager that's like, get it out and just dump it. Because I think that at least, and then this is what we're doing about it now that it's been flagged, as opposed to some of the reactionary stuff that we're seeing. Like, obviously, I think Pete Guthrie knows something that we don't. He's not going to say it, but there's obviously an ethical challenge that he is facing, and which is why, and I've spoken with him, he was on transition team with me for Premier Smith. So I think that there's something that he ethically can no longer stand behind. It's just unfortunate on the timing, because there's not something to point to.
Yeah, well, until the facts come out, we won't learn too much more. So again, back to kind of circle back to the immediate thing, the budget, and you're going to be breaking that down more in your shows. I mean, after the budget's been tabled and you can see it in detail. For this last part of this, the talk here, what would you like to see in it?
Well, I'm very happy, should there be, and I think, we're both speculating, but I'm pretty confident that the tax credit is coming for Albertans. So I'm very excited about that. I'd love to see really strong infrastructure and transportation investment, because we need to build. We have 250,000 new people here, and we need to expedite processes to get those people working, because I think there's a lot of new people here. We just need to get them jobs. If that's the case, and it may not be what they came here to do, but let's get them contributing to the economy. So I'm super focused on the economic side, and also just how the guardrails that the government's going to put in place should and when these tariffs come into place. So I want to see their projections on that. I'm not a huge focus on, how many encampments are we going to take down. I would like to also see tougher on crime and less hugging thugs. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a little bit more hard numbers and return on investment of how we're working as a province and a business.
Excellent. Well, before I let you go, then, where can people find your podcast for when I'm certain you'll be breaking that down, and where can they find your course again if somebody wants to find out how to interpret it for themselves?
Yeah, so Macamee College, as I see it spelled properly on the bottom, Macamee College website. We'll just go to the courses, and Applied Politics is there. And it breaks down all the classes as a 2-year diploma program. I'm teaching most of the curriculum now, but have other individuals that specialize in the sector. So you don't just have to listen to me for 2 years. And the podcast, where you have to listen to me half the time, is alongside Rachel Notley's former director of communications, Cheryl Oates. So we come at it from the left and the right on all issues. And it's called The Discourse. It's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Great. And just one more thing before I let you go. I didn't mention it. You're still a senator-elect. How long until that expires?
I used to try to brand it senator-elect, and now I feel it's more like in line with the senator and waiting longer. So we'll see someday. It's a position I'd be very honored to hold someday. We just need a new prime minister, and we need some of those old Liberal appointees to realize in Alberta that maybe it's time for them to retire.
Great. Well, I hope we get to see you in there. And in the meantime, though, you've got a lot on the go. So I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us today, Erica. And,
thanks, Corey.
We'll look forward to your interpretation of the budget there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thanks. All right. So that was Erica Barutis. She's been on before. As you can see, yes, lots of things, and covers it in a balanced way, not as crazed ideological as I am. She's been in the trenches with a couple of parties now and gives her views on it. So I do want to come back to that. I mean, it's a subject I talk about a lot. I talk about addiction. I talk about treatment. I talk about mental health. And I'm glad Erica brought that up with the centers, because I'm pretty kind of excited about these treatment centers. The compassionate care is what the Smith government's calling it. It'll have, I believe, 150 beds per center, possibly 300 beds in total. I'm not sure. I'd have to dig more into those numbers, and they should be operational within a couple of years. We're talking about $180 million being spent. I like the concept, but can we be confident that the Smith government's going to do it right? That's where we start to worry, because we're wondering what's going on in there. You've got a cabinet minister stomping out the door on you. We've got people demanding an inquiry over the AHS thing. I mean, I was optimistic about breaking AHS into multiple pieces, into changing things, into reforming them. But now it looks like this might be falling off the rails, because I do think there's room for these compassionate intervention centers, but if it's done wrong, it will set it back. It will bring those off the table for years to come. Because I keep looking, and people keep talking about, they never work. Well, wait a minute. Where has that been tried? And I haven't had anybody point to one yet. So how do you know it doesn't work? At the same time, as Erica kind of pointed out, though $180 million is a lot of money to spend on something we don't know if it will work. What I'm talking about, what I'm gathering from these centers, and it kind of ties into what I'm talking about with the stabbings as well, though. These are cases of people with serious mental health challenges. Mental health is very, very directly tied into addiction. That's why usually those departments are tied together. I won't go at length as to why I'm as familiar with addiction treatment as I am. I've been open about it. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I've dealt with addiction on other levels and other things. And different people respond differently, and different people hit different levels of addiction before they're ready for treatment. Some can, manage to get out early. Some never successfully are treated and unfortunately die. Freedom Honey pointing out, worked in Portugal. Portugal's a little different. Portugal, though, isn't forced treatment. It's not what we're talking about. Portugal's got a neat program, and it talks about how if you're coming in, you can be compelled towards treatment, and it's very treatment focused, absolutely. But what we're talking about with the compassionate care centers, or as people are calling it, forced treatment centers, is police, family members, a few others can apply to have somebody put in against their will for, I think typically they're going to be looking at maybe 30 days. And put into a center. Some people are saying, well, that infringes on liberties. Well, again, when we're talking about mental health, the Mental Health Act already covers it, okay? If you believe a person is going to do harm to themselves or others, they can be held in a mental health facility. It happens not as often, actually, not as often as it should when we see the stabbings of children. But I mean, if a person, the analogy I used online the other day, if you saw somebody running and smashing their face into a wall over and over and over and over again, they're compulsively doing it, something's gone wrong in their brain, they've blown a fuse and they keep doing it, we intervene. We stop them. We restrain them if we have to. We can't just let them keep hitting their face on the wall. And then we try to treat them. Will it work? Will it not? We don't know. And if you can't treat them and they just keep hitting their head on the wall no matter what, well, sometimes, you got to keep them for a long, long time. Now, you got to look at the scenario for some of the people, and we're talking about late-stage addicts. We're talking about these centers possibly having 300 beds. Anybody, because they're saying, they're just going to be swooping up. I saw one guy on X saying, oh, boy, well, recreational drug users better be afraid. Do you really think they want to spend that money on these 300 beds that we've got and go out and stick a pothead in one? Take somebody who's only got a minor addiction issue, and there are levels of addiction, and put them in there. Trust me, those beds will be full fast, and they're going to be with hard cases. Look on the streets. If you haven't been downtown in an urban center lately, you can see the hard cases I'm talking about. We're talking about the Walking Dead. We're talking about people that are basically at the end of their rope through addiction. They're scrawny, they're covered in sores, they're living behind dumpsters. They're often already missing digits from frostbite, from passing out in the cold weather. These are the ones. They're no longer anywhere close to sound mind. Maybe, and I know the shot is long, but maybe if you snatch one, because you got to remember, they do have parents, they have siblings, they have loved ones, but they've disconnected, they've moved on, and desperate families just want somewhere to put them. Put them somewhere for 30 days. Start with detox. Get the junk out of them under medical supervision. I mean, yes, chaining somebody down in a straight detox, you can do more harm than good. Get them straight, because they're not going to do it willingly. Maybe, I know it's a long shot, but you see, again, the chance of success when you leave them on the streets at that point are pretty much zero. They're going to die. They're going to overdose or get killed by another dealer or something. They're going to die. So even if it's only a 20% success rate, a 10% success rate in one of these centers, it's better than leaving them where they are once they've hit that state. Get them dry, maybe a week, maybe two. Maybe at that point their mind will click enough to say, yes, you know what, I'm ready to try treatment. They've eaten some meals. They've gone through the worst of the initial DTs. They've had time to sit with counselors. They've had time to sit with other recovered addicts. They've had time to try and consider these things. And then maybe they would embrace a longer-term program. I know a lot of them, after 30 days, you let them out, they're going to be behind the dumpster on their junk the day after. That's just the way it's going to be. But as I said, if we don't intervene, we already know the chances are zero. As I've seen some of the people talking about in the comments, we've already tried the other route, the enablist route, the almost cultish route of these lunatics who think if we just keep giving them enough drugs, they'll get over it. They won't. They get deeper into it. The drug is the problem. The drug, the addiction. You can't enable it and expect them to recover. They won't. They just keep going further, particularly when you're talking about opioids, when you're talking about fentanyl, you're talking about some of these things. So, yes, I would like to see these centers. I would like to see, I heard a quote from a recovered addict a little while back who said, again, as long as somebody's drawing a breath, there's still a hope. Because one of our things as human beings is, I really do believe, if we don't want to use the word compassion, compassionate conservatism. It means taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. And when somebody's that badly addicted, they can't take care of themselves. Then it's our jobs as people to take care of it. The part of the problem is we start going into UBI and crap like that, where we're taking care of people who are too lazy to take care of themselves. There's a big difference between the two. But when we have addiction and mental health issues, and that's the other thing too, that we've got to accept, and I know that's not in the current set of cards, but I hope we have more of those discussions. Deinstitutionalization. We shut down our mental health institutions. That's a trend that's been happening since the 70s throughout North America, throughout the world. And yeah, some of those institutions were terrible. They were sticking people in them because they were deaf. They were sticking people in because somebody bribed a doctor to get a family member out of the way. They were terribly abused. They were brought about for actually very good reasons, with the best interest of the patients at heart. That's why they were called asylums, but they got screwed up. And that's why I talk about when government takes something and good and then screws it up, it makes it bad in the long run. So we closed them down. Where did all the people with the mental health problems go? To the streets. We don't, they say, we'll just let them have community living. It doesn't work that way. When the voices in the head start talking to them, they don't stay in the community living area. That's the ideal position for people to be in. But a lot of them need treatment, and that means secured treatment. That means being in a facility. And here's the hardest part some people don't ever want to accept. Some people with mental health issues should be in an institution for the rest of their lives, or at least until we find some sort of surgical or drug breakthrough or something that fixes them. Because it's still better and more humane than having them in the streets. And I know it's a difficult decision to make. It's talking about a lot. It's talking about taking the liberty away from somebody who may not have committed a crime. But is it better? Is it really more dignified to leave them on the streets? The example I use is too for the frustrations of family when they're talking about an addicted member, a young person who's out there, and you see them on the streets, you see them desperate, you see them in that sad, sad shape. If it was your daughter, your son, that broke, that out of communication, and they're doing anything for their next fix. Do you really want to mentally imagine what they're doing to make a couple of dollars to get another fix? People say we got to maintain their dignity. There's no dignity left at that point. None. So what's to be lost? And pulling them in, well, there's something to be lost, $180 million. So Eric is quite, right in bringing that up and saying we got to look at the whole thing, because if we screw it up, we could make it worse. But we've screwed up the enablement thing. I don't think it would ever work. And I'm not wholly against safe consumption sites. I'm not wholly, but the thing is, it's got to be coupled with the second that person comes in. For one, you don't give them drugs and let them leave. Doesn't happen. No, absolutely not. All we're talking about is a spot where you can be supervised while you take it. So you should theoretically live through the drug you've taken. But you should be nagged from the second you walk in that door to the second you walk out to get into treatment. Push towards it, given the pamphlets. And that's the other thing too. Some other things, we don't have enough treatment beds for the people who want to get into them. That's another big issue. There's a lot of people with mental health issues and with addiction issues that really do want to seek help. They want to get into a stable facility, and there's not room. They go banging on the door and say, I'm ready for treatment, I'm ready for help, I'm ready to kick this. Great. We'll have a bed for you in 30 days. Hang in there, chump. Yeah, that's how it is right now. So you better hope, if they were at the point where they could go 30 days clean without help, they aren't addicted. They need to knock on the door and be taken in right now. At most, within a couple of days. Joe Mills, a commenter, saying treatment or jail. And jailing is kind of what ends up happening to a lot of the addicts in the long run. Is that better? Of course not. So it's another form of incarceration. If you leave them on the streets when they're that far gone, it's not just the morgue they might end up in. They might end up in the hospital, or they might end up in a jail. So we still end up spending the money. But a conventional hospital isn't going to offer the secured treatment that they need. And a jail is going to have them secured, but it usually makes them a lot worse off than they were to begin with. I want to see the murderers in jail. I want to see the addicts in treatment centers, and I want to see the people with mental health problems in mental health institutions. And we aren't funding any of those enough. But we're paying the price anyways. That's what people have to realize too. Boy, that would be terribly expensive. It's already expensive. Go downtown anytime, and the ambulances, they never stop. You never hear the sirens stop downtown. Who do you think's paying for that? For the constant revivals of people as they overdose. When you see the police constantly breaking up those encampments, when you see these addicts constantly going into jail, we're paying. We're paying. When they're robbing nearby businesses, when they're vandalizing places, when they're burning things down, we're paying. So let's pay on the treatment side then. Let's spend that money targeted. Make it better. Vamp Fashion saying Echo has all the temporary shelters we could need, and we'll build more. Yeah, I mean, part of it, and there's one of the discussions too. They talk about housing first. And again, there's one of the misguided concepts out there. The housing's important because, yes, you can't have, we'll have a voluntary treatment program. The guy who's living in a tent in a park is going to just come in on his own once a day and sit down and do group session and all of that stuff. No, they need to be in a facility. When they're talking about housing, they're talking about, we need to get the addicts into long-term housing before we can start treatment. Well, no. If they're that late stage addicted, they aren't ready for a house. They will strip the copper out of the walls and sell it for their next fix of junk. They will burn the place to the ground. They will turn it into a crack house. That's not being mean. That's reality. They need a stable environment, but it needs to be an institutional one. ATCO housing for people who are in trouble and just need to keep warm, absolutely. I mean, we don't want them freezing in the streets, but longer term, if they're addicts or have mental health issues, and let's quit pretending that the people on the streets are ones who just fell on hard luck. The vast, vast majority of them have mental health issues or addiction issues. That's the underlying thing. We have to treat that. If we don't, we won't solve it. It's a hard reality. Hard realities suck. But we don't fix anything until we address them. You gotta find courage. So we also have to find optimism. I really do hope that the centers that the Smith government are planning and put together work excellently. I hope they sort out the bloody AHS mess that they got going on in the Alberta government. And I hope that Trump becomes lucid and we can come up with good, productive trade agreements between Canada and the States and get on with our lives and making Alberta and the rest of Canada a better place. Okay, that's enough ranting out of me. Tune in next week. I'll be on Wednesday again at this time. And yes, there's going to be another show coming after that, which will be even a bit longer. It won't be live, but we'll be covering things at length. And I will have a number of guests. It's going to be very election focused, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. I really appreciate it. And tune into the pipeline tonight. There's another panel with us, and we're going to break down a few more of those issues. And I'll see you next week.